Welcome to my YouTube channel, Truth Untold Story. Which country are you watching this video from? If you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell for more emotional stories every day. Ethan Clarke stood at the window of his penthouse, staring out at the snow falling gently over the city. The skyline, once a symbol of ambition and success, now seemed like a distant, cold painting. Steam curled from the untouched cup of coffee in his hand, but he didn't drink it. It had become routine, making coffee, not drinking it, just to feel like he was doing something. His apartment was silent, too silent. The soft hum of the heating system was the only sound breaking the stillness. Walls, decorated with modern art and rare antiques, felt more like a museum than a home. Every corner reminded him of her, Margaret, his wife. 5 years had passed since cancer had taken her away. Time, they said, healed all wounds, but for Ethan, time had simply layered the pain in silence. He hadn't allowed himself to feel much since. Meetings, transactions, mergers, all distractions, all noise to drown the ache. Outside, the streets glowed under golden lamps, the snow crunching beneath occasional footsteps. Couples walked hand in hand, bundled in scarves and laughter. Families dragged sleds, their kids squealing with joy, tossing snowballs. Ethan watched them like a stranger observing another world. He wrapped a dark wool coat over his tailored suit, adjusted his scarf, and stepped out. The cold hit his face instantly, but he welcomed it, something real, something sharp. Snowflakes settled on his lashes, melting slowly, just like the days since he lost her. He walked with no destination, letting his feet guide him through the quiet city. The park wasn't far, only 3 blocks away from his building, but it felt like a world apart. Once, he and Margaret used to come here every weekend, sharing coffee on the wooden bench near the old oak tree. Now, the bench sat buried under snow, untouched, like a forgotten memory. He stood in front of it, the ghosts of laughter echoing faintly in his mind. A gust of wind blew past, and he pulled his coat tighter, though the chill came more from within than without. The silence here was deeper, more personal. In the stillness, he heard the crunch of his own steps, the whisper of wind, and nothing else. Not a single person greeted him. No familiar face smiled in recognition. Despite his billions, he had no one to call. Despite the luxury around him, he had no warmth to go home to. The emptiness was louder during winter, when the city celebrated and he mourned in silence. A street musician in the distance played a slow, haunting tune on a violin. He paused, eyes drawn toward the sound, but the player was far across the street, surrounded by people. Ethan remained where he was, watching, not joining. He felt like a shadow, present but unnoticed. His gloves tight, money continued to flow, profits climbed, but it all felt mechanical. The gears of his life turned, but they didn't move him forward. A mother passed by with her 2 children, their laughter rising in the air like birds in flight. One of the kids stumbled, and Ethan instinctively reached out, but the mother caught him first. She smiled politely at Ethan and kept walking. He lowered his hands slowly, surprised at his own reaction. Even the impulse to connect felt foreign now. He sat down on the frozen bench, the wood biting cold through his coat. A single breath escaped his lips in a foggy cloud, the kind Margaret used to chase with her laughter. He looked up at the sky. No stars tonight, just the steady fall of snow. He wondered how many winters he had left, how many more cold nights would pass before something changed, or if anything ever would. He placed his hand on the bench beside him, brushing off some of the snow. His fingers paused there, as if hoping to find a trace of her warmth. All around him, The world was moving, cars, laughter, music, but inside he remained still. A man frozen in time, buried not under snow, but under memory. In that vast, beautiful city, with all its light and life, Ethan Clarke sat alone. And that night, in the coldest winter, he had never felt more forgotten. Ethan sat on the icy bench, his thoughts swirling as thick as the snow around him. Just as he was about to rise and return to his cold penthouse, he caught movement from the corner of his eye. 3 small figures emerged from a narrow side path, dragging something large behind them. The figures were children. 3 little girls, bundled in mismatched coats that barely shielded them from the cold. Their boots were too big, their scarves unraveling, but they moved with purpose and joy. The bag behind them was massive, black, overstuffed, with one broken strap. It scraped and bumped along the icy sidewalk, leaving a trail in the snow. One girl tugged, while the other 2 pushed from behind, giggling at the effort. "Come on, Rosie, we're almost there," one of the girls cheered. "I'm trying." "This bag weighs more than my whole body." Rosie puffed, laughing. A third girl slipped, landed on her bottom with a thud, and burst into giggles. Instead of crying, she yelled, "I made a snow cushion," and the others laughed louder. Ethan watched, unmoving, eyes narrowing in quiet awe. He hadn't seen that kind of joy in years, pure, unfiltered, unbothered by hardship. The wind bit harder now, but they didn't seem to notice. Their thin jackets clung to them, cheeks flushed red, hair peeking out from knit hats. Still, they smiled. Still, they laughed. The bag caught on a patch of ice. That bag, it looked like it held more than just clothes. Cans peeked from the zipper. A small teddy bear dangled from the side. They weren't just playing, they were transporting their lives. He rose from the bench, slowly, instinct guiding him before thought could stop him. With measured steps, he approached them, his polished shoes crunching in the snow. "Do you need help with that?" he asked, voice gentle, unsure. All 3 girls turned in unison, wide-eyed at the tall, serious man. For a moment, there was silence, just their quick breaths in the winter air. Then the smallest girl stepped forward, her grin missing a front tooth. "No, sir, but thank you. We're helping Mama set up our new room at the shelter." Ethan blinked. He hadn't expected that. The word shelter hit harder than the wind. He glanced at the heavy bag again, then back to their bright, unbothered faces. "You're really strong to pull something that heavy," he said sincerely. "We're strong, 'cause we work together," Rosie said proudly. "And Mama says helping each other is how we get things done," added the oldest. "She's putting up curtains. But we brought all the blankets," chimed a third, holding up a corner of a quilt. Ethan nodded slowly, unsure of what to say next. "Do you live nearby?" he asked, almost afraid of the answer. The oldest nodded. "Well, kinda. We used to sleep in our car, but now we got a room." "It even has a window," one of them shouted, eyes sparkling. Ethan's chest tightened. Their excitement over something so small was humbling. They looked back to the bag and readied themselves for another heave. Without asking, Ethan bent down, grasped one of the broken handles, and lifted. The girls looked up in surprise. "It's okay, mister. We said we're okay." "I know," Ethan said softly, "but I could use the exercise." Together, they began walking, Ethan on one end, the girls on the other. He slowed his pace to match theirs, letting them lead the way. "Do you live alone?" one of the girls asked curiously, swinging a doll from her wrist. "Yes," he replied after a pause, "very much alone." "You should come to the shelter," another suggested innocently. "There's hot soup and puzzles. Mama makes the best paper snowflakes." Ethan smiled faintly. Not at the invitation, but at their warmth. Three little girls, with so little, offering him more than he'd had in years. The snow fell quietly as they continued down the icy path. Each step away from the bench felt like a step towards something unexpected. He didn't know where exactly they were going, he hadn't asked. But for the first time in years, Ethan Clarke didn't feel like turning back. The girls led the way down the snowy sidewalk, chatting endlessly.
Leela's the oldest.
But she still needs help tying her shoes, Rosie teased. Leela gasped in mock offense. Do not, it was just that one time. Ava giggled, pulling her scarf higher over her rosy cheeks. Their laughter danced in the cold air like bells. Ethan couldn't stop watching them, not with pity, but with wonder. He hadn't heard such genuine happiness in so long. Not from boardroom banter, not from dinner parties, only here, in the company of three children, towing hope through snow. The girls spoke about their mom, about how brave she was. She works at the diner in the mornings and then at the laundry at night, said Leela. She never sleeps, Ava added, as if it were a superpower. But she still reads to us, every night, even if she's really tired, Rosie said softly. Ethan remained silent, processing each word as if it carried weight. Not just information, but truths he had forgotten about love, about sacrifice. The shelter appeared suddenly, nestled between two brick buildings, its entrance modest, a faded green awning fluttering gently in the wind. Home sweet home, Leela said brightly. She ran up and knocked on the door with the back of her mittened hand. A volunteer opened it, face lighting up the moment she saw the girls. Back already? Your mum's just finishing the bunk setup. They rushed inside, dragging the heavy bag together. Ethan hesitated at the threshold. Warmth spilled out. Physical, yes, but also something else. Something emotional, something human. He stepped in slowly, unsure of his place in a world like this. The entryway smelled of stew, faint soap, and something sweet, maybe cinnamon. Leela waved him forward. Come on, Mr. Ethan. Don't be shy. He followed, his expensive shoes squeaking awkwardly against the worn linoleum. Children played in the corner with puzzles. A man played cards with an elderly woman. In the far back, a petite woman with tired eyes and a kind face stood near a bunk bed, tucking in fresh sheets and fluffing a single pillow. Mama, the girls chorused, running to her, arms wide. She turned, just in time, to catch them all in a warm group hug. Ethan stood still, watching the reunion as though it was sacred. The woman glanced up at him, surprised, but not unkind. Girls, she asked gently, who's this? He helped us carry the bag. He's nice. Ava beamed. The mother approached with cautious gratitude. I'm Michelle, she said, extending a hand. Thank you for helping them. Ethan shook her hand carefully, noting the warmth in her grip. I'm Ethan. It was nothing, really. No act of kindness is nothing, she replied with a quiet smile. One of the girls had already pulled out a thermos from the bag. She poured it into... He blinked, taken aback. I couldn't... You helped? Lila said. Helpers get cocoa. He hesitated, then accepted it carefully. The cup warmed his fingers. They all sat cross-legged on the floor, huddled in a circle. The room buzzed around them, but Ethan heard nothing else. He watched them sip, taking small, careful gulps to make it last. No one complained it wasn't enough. No one asked for more. They passed a single cookie between them, each taking a bite, smiling. He held his cup, the scent of chocolate rising to meet him. It reminded him of quiet Sunday mornings with Margaret. Back then, they used to talk for hours, sharing one mug between them, laughing over crossword puzzles and burnt toast. The warmth in his hands traveled slowly up his arms, then deeper, into something locked inside his chest. Something cracked open. something tender and forgotten. He looked at the girls, at their mother, at this modest but vibrant life. They had so little, and yet they had more than he did. He couldn't understand it fully, not yet, but he could feel it. Here, with strangers, he felt something real. He looked down at the hot chocolate and took a slow, careful sip. And for the first time in a long time, it didn't taste bitter. The snow had stopped by the time Ethan stepped back outside, but the cold wasn't what struck him. It was the silence. Not the silence of the street, but of his heart, now stirred, unsettled. His hands still carried the ghost of that small paper cup's warmth. The girls had hugged him goodbye without hesitation, their arms wrapping around him like he was already family. Michelle had thanked him again, eyes soft with sincerity. He'd promised, awkwardly, to drop by sometime. The door of the shelter had closed gently behind him, but the echo of laughter and cocoa and love stayed with him. His driver opened the car door with a bow, but Ethan barely noticed. He sank into the leather seat, staring blankly at the city as it rolled past. Skyscrapers rose like glass giants around him, each one a monument to his success, each one now hollow. His phone buzzed with alerts, emails, meeting notes, a board reminder. He turned it face down, uninterested. When he arrived home, the mansion loomed in gold and marble. He stepped through the grand doorway, greeted by silence and polished floors. Lights flickered on with sensors, but there was no warmth in them, just expensive bulbs chasing away the emptiness. The butler had retired for the night. His staff respected his solitude. Rooms stretched around him, large and ornate, but lifeless. He passed through the library without pausing to read, walked past the piano, untouched since Margaret's funeral. Dinner had been prepared, something extravagant, plated to perfection. The girls' laughter returned to him then, bright echoes in a house that hadn't heard joy in years. He thought of Rosie's missing tooth, Ava's bouncing curls, Leela's proud stance beside her mother. He pictured the way Michelle looked at her children, utterly exhausted, but full of peace. He lay back on the bed, eyes open, staring at the chandelier above. It sparkled, but it meant nothing. His thoughts swirled like snow outside. What was all of this for? The money, the deals, the empire? It hadn't brought Margaret back. It hadn't filled the empty nights. And now, after so long, something had shifted. Ethan got up and walked barefoot across the marble floors, past portraits and sculptures worth fortunes. He stood in the foyer, staring at the door, wondering what it would feel like to truly come home. Sleep never came. Only questions, only memories. As dawn crept in through the high windows, Ethan found himself still sitting in the same chair by the fire, cold coffee on the table untouched. He rubbed his face, then reached for his phone. It buzzed to life, lighting his tired expression. He scrolled through his contacts and pressed a familiar name. After a few rings, a sleepy voice answered. "Yes, Mr. Clarke." Ethan cleared his throat. "Good morning, Jenna. I need a favor." "Of course. What do you need?" "Find me that shelter. The one near the park." A pause. "The shelter, sir?" "Yes. I want to visit again." Another pause. Then, "Understood. I'll get the details right away." He ended the call, still staring at nothing. He didn't know what he was going to say when he returned. Didn't know if he'd be welcomed. But something in him couldn't stay away. There was a piece of his soul still sitting on that shelter floor. He got up slowly, the weight in his chest replaced by a quiet urgency. And as sunlight finally broke across the snow outside, Ethan Clarke, the man who had everything, realized he was chasing something he had once forgotten, the longing. The next morning, Ethan stood outside the shelter before it even opened. He held two bags, one filled with pastries, the other with wool mittens and hats. No press, no entourage, just him. When the door opened, he stepped inside, with a smile that surprised even himself. Michelle greeted him warmly, though with guarded curiosity. "You came back," she said, a hint of disbelief in her voice. "I meant it when I said I would," Ethan replied, setting the bags down. Lila spotted him from across the room and ran full speed into his arms. "Mr. Ethan," she squealed, "you came back like you said." "Of course I did," he laughed, steadying himself as Ava and Rosie joined in. They smelled like crayons, and when he finished, applause erupted from tiny hands. Each visit after that deepened something inside him. He helped repair a broken sink in the kitchen with a local volunteer. He brought a toolbox one morning and fixed the rattling vent in the girls' room. He was surprised by how satisfying it felt to do something with his hands. One Saturday, he showed up with 3 sleds, bright red with blue handles. The children squealed, pulling on gloves and running toward the nearest hill. Ethan followed, slipping and laughing as Rosie shouted, "Bet you can't go faster than me, Mr. Ethan." Snowflakes clung to his coat, but he didn't care. He hadn't felt this young in decades. When he fell into the snow beside Ava, she threw a handful into his face. His booming laugh echoed across the frozen field, startling even himself. In the evenings, he'd sit cross-legged on the floor of the shelter, coloring with the kids, letting them braid what little hair he had. One night, Lila handed him a crumpled card folded in 4. On the front were stick figures, him, the girls, and Michelle. Inside it said, "We love Mr. Ethan. He makes the world warm." He stared at it for a long moment, swallowing the lump in his throat. "I'm keeping this forever," he whispered, sliding it into his coat pocket. Michelle, watching from a distance, smiled to herself. Ethan began learning everyone's name at the shelter. Not just the children, but the seniors, the veterans, the single moms. He brought puzzles and tools, cocoa and soup mix, but most importantly, he brought himself. He started showing up without a reason, just to be there, to listen, to stay. One evening, he shared a meal with a former mechanic named Joe, who told stories about rebuilding engines in the 80s. They laughed over lukewarm stew and tales of flat tires. Ethan shared about his first car, a rusted old Jeep he bought in college. "I thought money made everything better," he admitted. "But maybe it just makes things louder." Joe nodded, tapping his spoon. "Money can't hug you good night." Ethan fell quiet at that. That night, he didn't go home right away. He helped tuck the girls in, one by one. He read Goodnight Moon while Rosie clung to his arm. Ava snored softly before he reached the last page. Lila whispered, "Thank you for being here, Mr. Ethan." He kissed her forehead like it was the most natural thing in the world. The room dimmed, night settling around them. Ethan lingered in the doorway, watching their tiny chests rise and fall. Then he turned to Michelle, who stood silently beside him. "You've built something real here," he said. "I want to be a part of it." She looked at him, not with doubt, but with understanding. "You already are," she said. Ethan walked out into the cold, but this time it didn't bite the same. The seasons shifted as the months rolled on, and with each passing day, Ethan found a new purpose blooming. No longer just a man of vast fortune, he was becoming a man of profound heart. He met with architects and city planners, working late into the night over blueprints and budgets. The shelter was no longer a single building. It was growing, expanding into a community center, a sanctuary. Families who had once slept on park benches now had safe homes, warm beds, and room to dream. Ethan poured his resources into this transformation, but more importantly, he poured his time. The trust fund he established was named after the girls, Angels of Hope. It provided scholarships, healthcare, and meals. Local businesses joined in, inspired by a billionaire's humble heart. Change, once distant, was now visible in bright smiles and brighter futures. The girls themselves became a symbol, a beacon. Rosie, Lila, and Ava, with cheeks still rosy from the cold, were invited to speak at events. Their voices small but powerful, their stories carried across the city like hopeful whispers. At the grand opening of the new housing complex, Ethan stood beside the girls, his hand resting lightly on Lila's shoulder. Michelle looked on, proud beyond words, her eyes reflecting the light of 1,000 possibilities. The press was eager to cover the story, cameras flashing, capturing moments of laughter, hugs, and tears. One reporter, poised and curious, stepped forward at the press conference, microphone extended, voice clear and gentle. "Mr. Clarke, what inspired this remarkable change? How did a man with everything find new meaning in giving away so much?" Ethan paused, looking past the cameras to the three little faces shining back at him. They were holding hands, a quiet fortress of hope, their smiles innocent but strong. He smiled softly, feeling the weight of his words and their truth. "They did," he said simply. "Three little angels with a heavy bag, but even heavier hearts full of love. They reminded me what true riches look like." A hush fell over the crowd as his words sank in. True wealth, he realized, wasn't measured in dollars or mansions. It was measured in love, in connection, in the courage to open your heart even when it's been broken. The girls beamed up at him, and in that moment, he saw reflected the man he had always wanted to be. Not the man with power or status, but the man who could make a difference. The new community was thriving, children playing in safe yards, neighbors sharing stories on porches, and Ethan walking those streets with a lightness he hadn't felt in years. Sometimes he caught himself humming the tunes the girls sang, their laughter echoing in old friends who once measured success by wealth, now marveled at the transformation they witnessed. At charity galas and business meetings, Ethan spoke about compassion and community, challenging others to look beyond profit margins to see the faces behind the numbers. His story inspired many, proof that even the hardest hearts can change, and though the headlines praised him, Ethan knew the true gift came from the smallest voices, from three little girls who carried a heavy bag, but even heavier hearts full of love. He looked at them now, no longer strangers, but family, and whispered a silent thank you to fate for that cold winter night. For in their courage, he had found his own, and in their love, he had found a new kind of wealth.